What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have another jam-packed show for you all. Such as Illinois, unranked Illinois, going up to West Lafayette and upsetting number 4 Purdue. What a big win for the Fighting Illini. And how about Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, reverse sweeping Baylor, number 9 Baylor, as that was a huge win, great statement win by Texas Tech, Big 12 in the house, and we have many other upsets, such as Notre Dame, the team that I still had faith in. They pulled off the reverse sweep against Georgia Tech this past Friday. So we have a lot of noteworthy matches for this weekend. Also, we have the Nike tournament. We had the Nike tournament this past weekend in Phoenix, Arizona, in terms of the high school girls volleyball team. Who impressed and who won the whole thing? So, hand me a volleyball, set up the net, because I'm about to serve you some volleyball action here on Set. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon. I'm a little bit earlier than normal, but it is what it is because I've got some stuff to do later on the afternoon. AKA, I'll be going on 3 and Out with Larry B for the primetime face-off because it's Raiders versus Chargers week, and yeah. So without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball business. But first and foremost, we have our sponsors to get to. So IE Sports Radio's first sponsor is the Southern California Warriors. The Warriors were on a bye last week as they are 3-3 heading into the final 4 weeks of the season. As this week they'll be taking on the Moreno Valley Mercury on Saturday at Fallbrook High School. So definitely check that out if you're in the Southern California area. I have checked out a couple Southern California Warriors football games, so definitely do check out the semi-pro football sports action. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on social media at SoCal Warriors, and you can follow them on Instagram at Southern California_Warriors. You can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word Southern, the word California, and then the word Warriors. Though I don't know how you're going to follow them on Twitter or follow them on Facebook and on Instagram because both of those social media sites are down. So it may take a while. At this moment, Instagram and Facebook are down. We don't know what's happening, and we don't know if it'll get resolved, but I digress. The second sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Fremen take care of that for you. Kit founded and has managed Background Check International since 1994, and he's here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier. Just as a disclaimer, however, this business is used for professional background checks and not for the use of any crimes such as identity theft or other illegal activity. You can follow them on their website, www.bcint.com, and whenever Facebook does get resolved and fixed, you can follow them on Facebook by typing in the word background, then check, then international, then put a dash, and then put BCI. So that's how you can follow Background Check International businesses. and the Southern California Warriors. Thank you to those two for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. You can follow IE Sports Radio on Twitter at IE Sports Radio, and whenever Instagram does get fixed, you can follow them on Instagram, also at IE Sports Radio. Then on Facebook, whenever that gets resolved or fixed, you can follow them on follow IE Sports Radio on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then the word sports, and then radio. So without any further delay, now let's get into the volleyball business. So we didn't have as many upsets as last week. Last week we had 9, but this past weekend we had 6 upsets regarding ranked teams. As I'm actually going to keep the segment I had last week called Quick Sets, and I'll skim through this quite briefly. So the first upset actually did not come from a Power 5 conference. It came from a non-Power 5 conference. It came from the Big East, as St. John's took down Creighton, and St. John's is from New York, and I bet you most of y'all didn't even know St. John's was a thing. Believe it or not, St. John's was actually 1-1 as they lost their first Big East Conference game to UConn of all teams. I'm surprised it was UConn. I thought they would lose to like Marquette. They also lost to Providence eventually, but that's a little bit later on. Anyway, so St. John's defeated Creighton in 4 sets. St. John's totally looked like a team that I figured that they were going to challenge Creighton. I said on last week's show that I could see St. John's giving Creighton a battle, and they definitely did so. Some stats that stood out to me were St. John's outdigging Creighton 66-57. You also had them outblocking Creighton 14-10. And then in terms of the individual stats, we had Rachel Rastelli, who had 22 kills, and then Georgia Walther had 16 kills. Those are the only double-digit kill leaders for St. John's. As for Creighton, they were led by Jayla Zimmerman, who had 17 kills, and then Nora Siss had 12 kills. But as a team, Creighton only hit 133, which was huge. That was quite crucial for Creighton. You also have to give it up for the St. John's block, and obviously playing on the road is tough, but then again, conference games are always tough. Like, look at what everyone else had to go through when it came to playing on the road. So that was kind of... I didn't think Creighton would actually lose. I thought they would get challenged, but St. John's really let them have it. So good job to the Johnnies. Speaking of teams that pulled off a upset on the road, Texas Tech upsetting number 9 Baylor was our second upset, as they actually pulled off the reverse sweep. And you got to give it up to Baylor as well. Baylor almost pulled out the win in the 5th set, but Texas Tech was able to survive and get the win, as there are 11 ties and 6 lead changes in set 5. There are 14 ties in set number 1, as Texas Tech, I didn't even know Texas Tech had a solid record. They haven't beaten anyone big time, and they were coming off of 2 5-set losses to Kansas, but I think Texas Tech is starting to put their name on the Big 12 map, as they were led by Kenna Sauer, who had 19 kills, Reagan Cooper had 14 kills, and Carrington Jones had 11 kills. Baylor pretty much outdid Texas Tech in every statistic, whether it was hitting percentage, whether it was blocking, whether it was digging the ball. It was quite surprising to see Baylor getting outdone, or Baylor outdoing Texas Tech in every stat and then losing. The only stat that Texas Tech did better in Baylor in was service errors, as they had 5 fewer service errors, and both teams had the same number of service aces with 3. So, kind of surprised to see Baylor losing that despite the numbers. Avery Skinner was actually the kill leader for Baylor, as she had 27 kills. She tapped into her inner Kentucky. Yassiana Presley had herself not the best game, as she had 16 kills, yes, but she also had 13 hitting errors. That was another statistic that's done. She hit 64 on the night, which is not going to get the job done. Lauren Harrison also had 12 kills, and she hit 308 just like Skinner. So again, it is rather unusual to see Baylor lose a match despite dominating most of the stats. So Good job to Texas Tech, and Baylor did get the second win over Texas Tech. I was kind of fearing that Baylor was going to lose both matches, and that would have put them further behind Texas in the Big 12 polls. Or not the Big 12 polls, Big 12 standings. Because it's already tough with Texas just raining all over everybody. But this kind of makes you wonder, is this going to be an easy ride for Texas going forward into the Big 12? We'll have to see. As the next big upset we had this past weekend was Illinois, the Fighting Illini, going to Holloway Gym and defeating Purdue in West Lafayette in 5 sets. It was an impressive victory for the Fighting Illini. They have been long yearning for a big-time upset, as they actually had an 11-3 record going into this match, and they were 2-0 in Big 10 play, but then Illinois just managed to pull out the big upset. The first set was what really stood out to me. 19 ties, 8 lead changes. Illinois took the first set 30-28, which was bonkers. And then Illinois also took another close set in set 3, 26-24. Illinois was led by Megan Cooney, who had 21 kills. Illinois also had 3 other players in double digits in terms of kills. In terms of digging the ball, Illinois did get outdug by 3, and then they also got outblocked as well. But all in all, for Illinois, they put on a stellar show. Even though they hit 179, and even though they got outblocked 15-10, they were solid. Looking at the statistics, it wasn't really their best night in terms of everything else, but they got the points that mattered the most, and they came up big in that 5th set. This was one of the matches that made me want to do set point, because I was going to take set point off this week just to recharge my batteries, but all in all, for Illinois, this is kind of the match that made me want to jump on here. This and Texas Tech over Baylor. That was quite amazing. So for Purdue, they were led by Caitlin Newton, who had 19 kills. Grace Cleveland had 14 kills, and Jael Johnson had 11 kills. It just wasn't enough, though, as Illinois was able to pull off the upset victory. Good job by Illinois. And then elsewhere on Friday, we jumped to the SEC as we had Notre Dame upsetting Georgia Tech at O'Keefe Gymnasium. This was another reverse sweep, as there was a reason why I was still on the Notre Dame train. I was still believing in Notre Dame. I said it on last week's show that I still have faith in Notre Dame. I'm not going to lose faith in them because they have a good roster. They have great players such as Zoe Nunez, Charlie Nigo, Hattie Monson at libero. They have 3 middles that they utilize in Lauren Tarnoff, Sammy Lockwood, and Lindsay Miller. But altogether, they have been struggling because of youth and whatnot. But Notre Dame is starting to pick it up. They also beat Clemson this past weekend, as Notre Dame, like I said, they reverse swept Georgia Tech, and I didn't say I correctly predicted this, but I knew they were going to give Georgia Tech a battle. Anyway, so Aubrey Hamilton, the sophomore, led Notre Dame in kills with 20. She only had 2 hitting errors. That was what stood out to me. The 20 kills and only 2 hitting errors for the hitting percentage of .375. That really took a lot of pressure off of the pin hitters from the right side and the left side, a.k.a. Caroline Muth and Charlie Nigo, who both had 14 and 12 kills respectively. As a team, Notre Dame hit .291, which was very impressive. And one stat that really stood out to me was that Notre Dame outblocked Georgia Tech 14-5. That is big time right there. Now, another stat that stood out to me in a negative way was Georgia Tech outdigging Notre Dame 80-60. I cannot believe Notre Dame got outdug by 20, yet they still won. It's quite amazing, honestly. It just goes to show that Notre Dame does have a good team, and they are solid. And then in terms of service aces, Notre Dame dominated that category as they had 8 service aces compared to Georgia Tech's 2. As for Georgia Tech, individually statistic-wise, they were led by Julia Bergman, who had 30 kills. She did have 10 hitting errors, but her hitting percentage was solid as she hit .317. Mariana Brambilla and Bianca Bertolino each had 12 kills as well. And like I said, Georgia Tech outdug Notre Dame 80-20, but it just wasn't enough. No, Georgia Tech didn't hit that bad, however, as they hit 253 on the night, but all in all, this was a match that Georgia Tech needed to win, and now they're kind of behind in terms of the ACC. Like they still have a chance to win, but winning it against Louisville and Pitt is going to be tougher, as Georgia Tech also lost to Louisville this past Sunday. They gave it their all in the second and third set, but Georgia Tech just didn't have enough punch against Louisville. And it wasn't because of this loss. It was because that Louisville is just so freaking talented, man. Like, it's crazy. But I could still see Georgia Tech making the NCAA tournament. So, good stuff from Notre Dame, though. Like, if they could actually use that win to, like, propel them to more wins in the ACC, this team, if they get above 500, could, hence the word could, make the NCAA tournament. But we'll have to see. Then on Sunday, we had a pair of upsets, as we had Texas A&M, a team that I bashed last season because they were underachieving. They took down Tennessee, number 21 Tennessee, on the road in Knoxville in 5 sets. It was an amazing victory for the Aggies. They've been long yearning for a big-time victory. Texas A&M actually was 9-4 going into this match, and they were actually coming off of a loss to Tennessee, as Tennessee took the first match in 3 sets, but then the Aggies were able to pull out the win, and they were able to hand Tennessee their first loss in SEC play. It was quite amazing for Texas A&M, as they were led by Morgan Christian, who had 20 kills. The stat that stood out to me when it came to her was the hitting percentage. She hit .364. And then also Texas A&M got contributions from Lauren Davis and Destiny Cox, who had 16 and 15 kills. Camille Connor added 9 kills, and she had 45 assists, and she had 14 digs. She almost had that triple-double. She messed around and nearly got a triple-double, man. Amazing stuff. Those are Madden numbers right there. And then in terms of blocks, Texas A&M outblocked Tennessee 17 to 14.5, which isn't that much, but all in all, Texas A&M does have a solid team. They're not like on the level of Kentucky, but I think this win helps them tenfold. Tennessee's kill leaders were very balanced, as they had 5 players cracking double digits in terms of kills. Danielle Mahaffey led the way with 14 kills. She hit .429 as she only had 2 hitting errors. And then Brianna Runnels had 13 kills. And then Ava Bell, Morgan Fingal, and Lily Feltz had 11 kills apiece. All in all, for Tennessee, this one loss won't define them as an SEC team. I could still see them making the NCAA tournament, but they just can't have losses like these stack up, because they had losses to like Alabama and then Georgia. And then I want to say they lost a few to, I don't think it was LSU. I think they lost one to Arkansas. Regardless, they just had too many losses in the SEC from last year, like, pile up, and that eventually pushed Tennessee from being an at-large team to being the first 4 teams out. And the defense of Tennessee from last season, the NCAA tournament was a 48-team tournament as opposed to 64, which really did not do them any favors. So, all in all, for Tennessee, they're still fine. I could still see them coming up big in SEC play, but now their margin of error is very limited. So, especially when they're having to play like teams like Florida and Kentucky. And then lastly, in terms of the upset specials, we had in the Pac-12, Utah upsetting Oregon, handing Oregon their first loss in Pac-12 play. And believe it or not, Oregon was the last undefeated Pac-12 team until Utah said otherwise, handing them their first loss in Pac-12 play. They won in 4 sets, and most of these sets were somewhat one-sided, as the second set, Oregon really let Utah have it, as this took place in Salt Lake City, Utah, but that didn't mean anything to Utah, as they managed to pull off the win in front of their home crowd. And they pulled themselves into a tie for first place along with UCLA, which split their weekend, as they split the weekend defeating Washington State and then losing to Washington on Friday. They beat Washington State on Sunday in 5 sets, and then they lost to Washington in 5 sets on Friday. So back to Oregon, Utah. Utah was led by Danny Drews, who had 19 kills. Madeline Robinson had 10 kills, and Zoe Wetherington had 9 kills. In terms of noteworthy stats, Utah held Oregon to 173, which is quite the low hitting percentage. And then they also outdug Oregon 61 to 54. So all in all, for Utah, they came in with a great game plan. The thing about Utah is that they are such an up and down team. One week they're going to have a big week where they pull off a amazing win, and then sometimes they'll have this worrisome loss. Case in point, they upset Nebraska, then lost to Boise State, then lost to BYU, then beat Washington, then lost to Colorado. Now they beat Oregon. You know what I mean? Like, this is kind of that little up and down all around for Utah. So for Oregon, it's nothing too serious. They only had one loss coming into this match, and that was to Minnesota. And then all in all, for Oregon, they're still in a good position. Like, with how competitive the Pac-12 is, I think it's anyone's conference. You look at teams like UCLA. They wound up getting reverse swept by Washington. They still can win it. You look at Washington, which started off conference play 0-2. They've won their last 2, and I think they're starting to get it together. Washington State is still plenty hot despite stumbling against USC and UCLA. And then you look at this Oregon team, that was their first loss of Pac-12 play. I think they're still fine. And then also Utah is still up there. And you can't forget about Stanford. Although they played the Arizona schools, not trying to say the Arizona schools aren't anything to keep an eye on, but honestly, Stanford is also up there in terms of the Pac-12 elite. So for Oregon, this loss means absolutely nothing. They just can't have too many of these Pac-12 losses stacking up, just because Pac-12 play is what matters the most, and you never know if which loss could lead to some unfortunate turn of events. So I was talking about some noteworthy action in terms of non-upsets. Like I said, UCLA got reverse swept by Washington, but that's not the end of the world for UCLA. That was only their first Pac-12 conference loss. I think they're still in good shape. And then also on Saturday, we had Minnesota reverse sweeping Northwestern. Like, that was kind of unusual, seeing Northwestern taking the first 2 sets, and then we also had Minnesota taking the 3rd set and then just barely squeaking off the 4th set and then eventually grinding it out and taking the 5th set. Minnesota for sure needed that win because the night before they were coming off of a loss to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin is also trying to pick up after they lost to Maryland. And Wisconsin knows now that the Big Ten is no longer theirs for the taking. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be an all-out dogfight. And then, speaking of the Big Ten, Nebraska and Penn State are both undefeated, as this week these two teams will be facing each other on Friday. But I'll be getting into that in a little bit. Now, that won't be until segment number 2 of Set Point. And then there were some other noteworthy games that I saw. I know we also had college football happening and then NFL happening, but we also had great noteworthy little non-Power 5 scores happening, as we had Cal State Fullerton almost beating Hawaii. Now, I saw the first 2 sets, and I'm like, okay, Hawaii's going to win this one easy, because they were coming off of a win over Long Beach State, and then they wound up losing the next 2 sets against Cal State Fullerton. And keep in mind, Cal State Fullerton was also reeling from their loss to Long Beach State, which Long Beach State also lost to Hawaii on Friday. So it's quite the spider web of what's been happening as of late. But for Hawaii, they were able to restore order, and they were able to take that 5th set 15-10. I was a little surprised to see Hawaii struggling. I don't know if Hawaii just pulled its starters, or they shuffled their lineup, or maybe Cal State Fullerton is better than everyone expected, because Fullerton is a solid team. They pushed Cal Poly to 5, and then they also pushed Hawaii to 5 until they wound up ultimately losing to Long Beach this past Tuesday. So the Big West is kind of still an unknown. And then you have some 3-1 teams that are still undefeated. And then you have UC Santa Barbara. Now, UC Santa Barbara, that is another team that I made note of on Friday. Santa Barbara, the Gauchos, had themselves a rough non-conference schedule. They had a bunch of 5-set losses, and they had a bunch of competitive losses. But now they're currently, I want to say they're 4-0 as of right now, because that team is looking rather competitive. They have some good players on that team. They have Gigi Ruddins, who has provided a great spark for them. They also have Tallulah Froley, who has definitely done great things for them. I really think that the Gauchos can get the job done. And yes, Santa Barbara is 4-0, as they're also 8-8, so they're back at 500. And this week, Santa Barbara will be hitting the road to Cal State Bakersfield. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at that wrong. They beat Cal State Bakersfield in their most recent game. This week, they are back at home in the Thunderdome to take on Long Beach State on Friday, and then they take on Cal State Fullerton on Saturday. So, more times than not, they have success in the Thunderdome against Long Beach, and I'm sure they'll have success against Fullerton. Nothing against Fullerton. I think Fullerton has improved, but they just don't have the noteworthy wins that'll make me say, I think Fullerton's a legit team. Like, unlike Long Beach State, and this is no knock on Fullerton, and this isn't me being a homer to Long Beach State. Long Beach State does have some competitive games they've played. They faced a few top 25 opponents, and they also played Washington State, which was hot at the time. I think they had won 8 in a row before losing to USC and then eventually losing to UCLA. But for Long Beach State, they played themselves quite a difficult and challenging schedule. And honestly, I thought they would at least be 2-2 at this point in terms of the Big West Conference. Be 2-2 at worst, but there's still plenty of time for Long Beach to get it together. Like this week, Long Beach State, in terms of the Big West Conference, is hitting the road to Santa Barbara, like I said, and then they're also playing Cal State Northridge or CSUN on Saturday as well. And then Long Beach will be back next Friday against UC San Diego, and then next Saturday they'll be back at UC. They'll be playing at UC Irvine, in which I hope to go to that game to cover it for IE Sports Radio. I'd have to talk to the SID for Long Beach State, but we'll see. We'll see. Let's keep our eyes and ears peeled for what may come when it comes to that. So that's kind of my little trip around the globe. Now, before we continue on, or before we go to the break, we have to get into the top 25, as the top 25 has been shaken all over the place, other than the top 3, of course. So, start off with 25 through 22, as 25 through 22 consist of San Diego at 25, Colorado at 24, Pepperdine at 23, and Tennessee at 22. I'm surprised Tennessee is still ranked after losing to A&M, but I guess A&M is a solid team, and A&M actually is pretty good. They're not bad, but they're certainly not like last year, that's for sure. And they're certainly not like 2019. So I digress. So 20 through 16 consists of Western Kentucky and Florida at number 20, Creighton at 19, Georgia Tech at 18, Stanford at 17, and UCLA at 16. 15 through 11 consist of Utah at 15, Oregon at 14, Penn State at 13, Baylor at 12, and Washington at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Nebraska at 10, BYU at 9, Minnesota at 8, Ohio State at 7, and Purdue at 6. And then 5 through 1 consists of Kentucky at 5, Wisconsin at 4, Louisville at 3, Pitt at 2, and then your number 1 team in the AVCA coaches polls for Week 7 is... you already know this. Texas. So, some interesting placements in the coaches poll. So, no one has moved out. This is the same 25 teams that were in it last week. It's just that there's been a lot of shuffling. Pepperdine is... I also should make note that Pepperdine also survived a 5-set match with PCH Cup rival LMU. And I get LMU is good, but Pepperdine has been playing quite a bit of 5-set matches. They had to go 5 last week against Santa Clara, and they also went 5 with UC Santa Barbara as well. So Pepperdine's got to be careful in terms of being the cardiac kids, but they're still having a solid season, and their only loss was to Washington, which is nowhere near a bad loss. So there's that right there. San Diego, I'm surprised, is still clinging on to being number 25. I think they'll have a big test coming up soon. Not this week, but the following week possibly. And then Colorado still clinging on to that number 24 spot after posting some solid results. They still have that win over Utah despite losing to Washington State. I'm surprised Washington State isn't knocking on the door because, like I said, they had won 8 in a row before losing to USC and UCLA. And both those losses were actually at home, so I kind of understand why they weren't ranked. Washington State wasn't ranked. But I digress. So, and then Tennessee, like I said, it's tough to really take Tennessee out of the top 25 just because they have that win over Baylor. They also have that 5-set loss to Pitt. Then you also have that 3-set loss to Purdue, which Purdue is obviously a top 10 team. And then Texas A&M, I think, is starting to resurge itself. My only thing is for the SEC is that, is it for real? I think it has a lot of parity going on, and I think it's wide open. It is up for grabs. Heck, even Mississippi State has a chance. Now, one team I think had quite the surprising results from last week was Ole Miss, as they wound up getting swept by Florida both times, and then they wound up losing a 5-setter to Kentucky. I thought they would have at least taken 1 set off of Florida, but it was unfortunate. But you kind of got to give it up for Ole Miss. Kind of. They do have that win over Western Kentucky. But I don't think they're going to be ranked anytime soon unless, of course, unless they somehow get hot and then everyone else starts getting cold and whatnot. So we'll see what happens with the rest of the SEC and some of the other conferences. But that is going to do it for segment number 1 of Set Point. Segment number 2 is about to get underway after this commercial break. Just going to take some time to recharge my batteries. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. When we come back, we'll have the NCAA women's volleyball matchups to watch for in Week 7, and we'll also have a recap of the Nike tournament. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a word from these commercials.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point. You can all follow this show on several different streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, iHeartRadio. Yes, this show is also on iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spreaker, you name it. As we say hello to Miss Gina G in the chat room, thank you for joining me. Gina's show, Reppin' to NorCal Sports, would come on at 3 p.m., but it's actually going to get moved to Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and definitely do check out Gina's show. She does an awesome job with Reppin' to NorCal Sports, and she's most likely going to be talking about the San Francisco 49ers and the San Francisco Giants winning the NL West in terms of the regular season. And then she'll maybe even talk some Stanford women's volleyball or Fresno State women's volleyball. We'll see. But I digress on that. So let's jump into segment number 2 of Set Point. So now for segment number 2. So this little high school volleyball tournament happened. It wasn't quite little. It was the Nike Tournament of Champions in Phoenix, Arizona. So this little tournament was quite special because it wasn't just California teams, it wasn't just Arizona teams joining from all over the world. It was every team joining, whether it was from the East Coast, South Coast, or from the Dirty South, the Midwest, all that stuff. Every team was participating, including the California teams as well. So, as for the teams that wound up The team that wound up winning was Marymount, which is from California. Now, Marymount has had an outstanding season. They have not lost a match all year. Good job, Marymount. The crazy thing is that in this tournament, they didn't even lose a set, which is the second time they've participated in a tournament, and they haven't dropped a set. The last tournament they partook in was Durango, and they wound up sweeping that tournament in no pun intended fashion. The thing I will knock about the Tournament of Champions was that I didn't get to see the set scores from all the pool play matches, from the preliminary matches and whatnot. So all I just saw was that Marymount beat this team 2-0. This other team beat that other team 2-0. So yeah, I wish the Nike Tournament of Champions would have done that, but I guess they have max preps for that. But anyway, Marymount is still undefeated, and I could see them winning their Southern Section championship this season. Like, if there's any year for them to win CIF, it's this year. Carrie Klein has done an outstanding job with that program, and they have quite a bit of Division I talent. Marymount is always one of those teams that always does good year in and year out. And yes, I understand they're a private school, but we can't knock that. I digress on the private school thing, though. For those of you wondering where Marymount is, it's in Los Angeles, California, so it's kind of in Southern California. I probably won't give them their props on SoCal Supreme Sports Show just because I'm giving them their props here. So, good job to Marymount on winning the Nike Tournament of Champions tournament. A team that I kind of feel that underachieved, which I was very surprised this team didn't do as great as I thought, was Mater Dei, which is kind of Marymount's somewhat rival, as Mater Dei wound up losing in the round of 16, and then eventually they wound up finishing 10th, which they lost to Archbishop Mitty, which is a school in Northern California. I shouldn't just say they're a school in Northern California. They're the juggernaut when it comes to Northern California high school volleyball. So I was a little surprised that Mater Dei finished 10th. I thought they would have at least lost in the quarterfinals, maybe the semifinals, but I guess things happen. And the team they lost to was Horizon, which eventually wound up making the tournament championship. But for Mater Dei, I think they're fine. I think this loss won't define them. I think they will be just fine going forward. They have a good foundation of players. Their players are still very talented. They only have one Division I commit, let alone one college commit altogether. But I think that'll change once some of these players finalize where they're going and they make their decision. So for Mater Dei, I think I will see them in the sectional finals as, believe it or not, under Dan Odell, their head coach, they have made the finals, I think it was 7 straight years, dating back to 2013. Yes, 7 straight years, and last season doesn't count because there were no Southern Section playoffs and whatnot, so yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mater Dei made the finals this year. They do have some competition, but again, this is Southern Section. I don't really want to get into much of that just because that is in my neck of the woods. Although Marymount and Mater Dei are amongst the nationally ranked. I think Marymount is the top-ranked team in the nation. I would have to check Max Preps, but I'm almost 95% certain after this tournament, Marymount is the top-ranked team in the nation. So, a team that I thought that overachieved was Vista Murrieta, which is also in Southern California. That, however, is not a private school, as that is a team from the Inland Empire, as Vista Murrieta wound up finishing 4th in the tournament altogether. They wound up losing to Leon of Florida in 3 sets. By the way, the match format was best 2 out of 3. It wasn't 3 out of 5, because that'd be a lot of frickin' volleyball being played. But I digress. So, for Vista Murrieta, I think that team is sneaky good. I think that team could be a dark horse, and I'm not just saying that because their mascot is named the Broncos. I think Vista Murrieta can make a sneaky late push in the CI of Southern Section playoffs. Now, can they defeat Mater Dei or Marymount? That remains to be seen, but I think Vista Murrieta is underrated, in my opinion. They have a very talented player in Claire Little, and I think she is going to do wonders for that team. And I think she and then someone else are probably amongst the top recruits in the class of 2023. So I'll get into that in a little. I'll probably get into that in the near future, but Vista Murrieta is a team to watch for in the Southern Section playoffs, and then also Lakewood, a team that didn't partake in this tournament, and in Durango is also a team to watch for. Redondo Union is also a team to watch for. And then also, before I close the book on high school volleyball, Miracosta is a team to watch for. And also, a big shout out to Holly McPeak, as her jersey was retired by Miracosta girls volleyball, as she became the first jersey to be retired in the new Miracosta Gymnasium. And by the way, that Miracosta Gymnasium, I think I've already said this, but that Miracosta Gymnasium is like a college gymnasium. It's ginormous, man. It's huge, dude. I think it was over $1 million of a renovation. It's absolutely amazing, man. So So anyway, congratulations to Holly McPeak for getting her jersey retired from Mira Costa High School. So great stuff from her, and great job. So yeah, that was great stuff from Holly McPeak, and Mira Costa is in first place in its league. Believe it or not, they actually swept Redondo Union on the night they retired Holly McPeak's jersey. And it was quite fitting because they swept him in front of their rival, and I couldn't believe it. Redondo Union is still one of the top teams in Southern California and in the nation, but even their coach kind of said that Palos Verdes, the rival of Redondo Union and Mira Costa, is also one of the more talented teams. But there's still plenty of time for Redondo Union to turn it around. And I might be able to see Redondo Union up close and personal this week because the Redondo Union tournament is this weekend. There's going to be a lot of talented teams in that tournament, such as Mira Costa, Redondo Union, Torrey Pines. I think Cathedral Catholic is in. I'd have to get confirmation on that, but I might be checking out some Redondo Union tournament action, and Mira Costa and Redondo Union are the host sites, so there's that right there for both. There's that for a little information about that, so we'll see if I can get coverage to that. I know I won't be, well actually no, I do have a press pass. I do have a media pass for high school sports. Duh. So, I'll see what happens when it comes to that little tournament. Like, we'll see if I have enough time on my hands to go. If so, awesome. If not, then c'est la vie. Well, that's going to do it for high school volleyball. I have ranted quite a bit about high school volleyball. We're only at 46 minutes just because I did have that quick set segment because I've kind of reformatted the recapping portion of my show. Instead of dragging out the recaps, I'm just doing quick 2, maybe 3, 5-minute recaps of some of those matches. So that's kind of the reason why we're only at 47 minutes when it comes to recording. Currently, as of right now, it is 2:47 p.m. Pacific time. So all we have left is the matches to watch for this weekend, and then I'll send you all on your way. And Gina says, more Teran media coverage, woohoo. Thanks, Gina. Yeah, we'll see if I'll be able to go to that Redondo Union tournament. I have ties to some teams that are participating, so we'll see. But now, to close out the show, we have the NCAA women's volleyball matches to watch for in Week 7. So it's not a full slate like it was last weekend, but on Wednesday, we will have number 6 Purdue traveling to Illinois to take on Illinois. Now, the reason why this is a noteworthy matchup is because Purdue actually lost to Illinois last weekend, so this could kind of be a little bit of a grudge match for Purdue because Purdue lost in Holloway Gymnasium, so now they'll get the chance to return the favor to Illinois. It's also a crucial matchup for Purdue due to the fact that this could knock them out of the top 10. So if they don't play their cards right, then this could be bad news. Another noteworthy matchup to watch for on Wednesday is Mississippi State at number 5 Kentucky. Now, I was going back and forth whether to put this matchup on the list, but I think Mississippi State is having a phenomenal year. In terms of the SEC, they're 3-1 while Kentucky is 2-0. Now, Kentucky hasn't played too many matches, as I guess that's how their schedule is constructed, but this could be a big test for Mississippi State, and believe it or not, Kentucky is the only undefeated team that's left in the SEC. So if Mississippi State does play its cards right, then the SEC will have a lot of chaos, and I'm all for that. I mean, there's no remaining teams that are left in the Pac-12, so that's something to make note of. Speaking of the Pac-12, a noteworthy matchup for Friday, as we jump to Friday, is number 24 Colorado at number 16 UCLA. Now, Colorado has been on the cusp of good and bad. They're kind of in the middle. So they're on the cusp of being a good team, a good team in terms of being moved up, but then they have a loss. They sometimes will have a loss that just sets them back. This is kind of a big week for them because Colorado is hitting the road to Southern California, and it's going to be a lot different. So, in terms of the Pac-12, it's wide open. Even Colorado can win the Pac-12, but there are plenty of talented teams that can win that conference. So, there's that. And then also, in terms of the Pac-12, I put this as an honorable mention. Number 15, Utah at USC. I don't think Utah is going to lose this matchup. As much as I want to see USC pull off the win, I think Utah is more than capable of pulling out the victory, especially after getting the win over Oregon. But now they're going to be forced out of their comfort zone, and they will be playing USC, which it's always tough to beat USC at USC, but it's not impossible. So we'll see if the Trojans can pull off the win. It would be a huge win for USC because they're kind of on the cusp of possibly moving up in the Pac-12 standings, but they're still stuck in the 2-2 range. They're stuck in the average category. So we'll see if USC can pull out the win or if Utah will stay pretty much atop the Pac-12 standings. Moving away from the Pac-12 and heading back to the SEC is number 22 Tennessee at South Carolina. Now, Tennessee should consider themselves fortunate because they are lucky to still be in the top 25. After a loss to Texas A&M, they kind of have me worried a little bit because now they're hitting the road to Charleston to take on South Carolina. As South Carolina, they too are also a solid team. I think South Carolina is on the bubble of being ranked or basically just being in the receiving votes category. As South Carolina, or as everyone calls them, the other USC, they have a solid team. Their team is very promising, and I could see that team making the NCAA tournament. But they have to play their cards right in terms of beating certain teams, because with how wacky the SEC is, I think anything is possible. And their only loss was to Texas A&M, which that just proves the point of the SEC being up for grabs, because Tennessee lost to Texas A&M, which lost to South Carolina, which plays Tennessee, in a 2-game series on Friday and on Saturday. So this is South Carolina's big chance to possibly move into the top 25. And this is also a big test for Tennessee to prove that if they are for real or if they are fake. Because I praised Tennessee at the beginning of the season, and I even said last week when Seth Eves, USRN and iSports Radio's own, asked the question, can Tennessee win when it matters? And I'm hoping they can do so. Like, don't make me a liar, Tennessee. And Gina says hopefully USC will step up, as in Southern California. So I hope they can too, because they had promise at the beginning of the season. And then they lost to Denver. And then it's kind of this limbo of them just not pulling out that big-time victory. They kind of got their, what is close and deemed of as a big victory, as they did beat a red-hot Washington State. But it would have been even bigger had Washington State probably had beaten UCLA, but I don't know. Maybe USC can get this big-time victory this weekend. But back to Tennessee and South Carolina, that's a great series right there. It's the battle of a team that's on the bubble of making the top 25 versus a team that wants to prove themselves after last week. And then finishing off the noteworthy matches from Friday is number 10 Nebraska at number 13 Penn State. 2 4-0 teams from the Big Ten. I think this is kind of the match of the week right here. Now, Penn State has struggled when it comes to beating Nebraska. Whether it's at Rec Hall, whether it's in Lincoln, Nebraska, whether it's in the NCAA tournament, Penn State just seems to have the house of horrors when they play Nebraska. This could be Penn State's chance to silence the doubters and to move into first place in the Big Ten. Now, the same can be said for Nebraska, as they just got back Lauren Stivrins after she was injured, but now she is back for Nebraska, and she helped Nebraska move to 4-0 this past weekend. So I expect a barn burner from Nebraska and Penn State. Like, that is the matchup to watch for this weekend. Like, I don't mean to put down the other matchups, but this matchup right here is close to being as intense as it is possible. So, on Saturday, I already mentioned Tennessee and South Carolina being noteworthy. Another noteworthy matchup in terms of the South, but heading to the Big 12, is number one Texas at Kansas. Now, again, I was borderline of putting this matchup on here just because Kansas is 3-1 in Big 12 play, but they don't have any standout victories. But if for some odd reason Kansas were to beat Texas, and based on how Texas Tech had upset Baylor, I would kind of put this as a matchup to watch for. This is kind of like one of those sneaky good matchups. And I think Kansas has what it takes to stay with Texas, but I could still see Texas pulling out the victory. Nothing against Kansas. They do have some solid players that they return, but I don't think Kansas is ready to take that next big step. It is at Kansas, and they will have the benefit of playing at home while Texas is going to be traveling, but Texas is more than capable of winning on the road. Look at what they did against Texas A&M. Come on. And like I said, number 22 Tennessee at South Carolina is another noteworthy matchup. I already talked about those two, so let's just jump to Sunday, and then that'll conclude the noteworthy matchups to watch for. So let's jump to Sunday. Now, Sunday has quite a bit of noteworthy matchups. We'll start with this matchup, Syracuse at Louisville. Now, this matchup right here is a good matchup because Syracuse's only loss in the ACC as of right now is to Boston College. But if Syracuse does beat Notre Dame on Friday, then Syracuse versus Louisville will be a very big-time matchup. And the reason I say that this could be a big matchup is basically the same reason I have Kansas and Texas State as well as Mississippi State at Kentucky. Second place taking on first place. And this could be crucial. Although Louisville is on another level when it comes to the ACC, I could still see Syracuse maybe, just maybe, giving Louisville somewhat of a challenge. Now, Georgia Tech gave Louisville as best of a challenge as possible, but for Syracuse, it does not discredit that they are not a good team in the ACC. You look at what they did last year to Pitt, albeit it was a shorter season, and albeit that Pitt and Syracuse didn't have a non-conference slate, I think Syracuse could possibly, and this is a possibly, not a guarantee, but I think they could possibly maybe give Louisville a challenge. But I'd still put money on Louisville. Speaking of the ACC, another noteworthy matchup to watch for on Sunday is number 18 Georgia Tech at number 2 Pitt. And I promised someone I would put this as a noteworthy matchup. And I was going to put this when it comes to, I was going to tweet out that this was a noteworthy matchup, but I kind of ran out of characters. And also, it's number 18 versus number 2. But that doesn't mean that Georgia Tech Pitt is not going to be a great matchup. Oh, no. I think Pitt will be in for a treat against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech suffering its first loss against Notre Dame, and then eventually losing to Louisville. But Louisville is on another level, and I think Notre Dame is underrated, in my opinion, despite a sub-500 record. So, for Georgia Tech, this is a big-time matchup right here, just because if they can knock off Pitt, then that'll cause a lot of chaos in the ACC. But Pitt and Louisville both know that Sunday's matchups could be crucial because the ACC is drastically improved. Even the teams that don't have a win in the ACC are proving to be possibly a threat. I wouldn't say like a threat, but being a challenger approaching. Regardless, I think Pitt will beat Georgia Tech. However, I wouldn't sleep on Georgia Tech. So, I think Pitt is for real as well as Louisville, but they kind of have to show it in ACC play because eventually, not this weekend, but the following weekend, Georgia Tech and Pitt, not this weekend, but in 2 more weekends after this weekend, Georgia Tech and Pitt will be facing one another, and that's going to be fireworks right there. Number 2 versus number 3. If those two stay undefeated, it's going to be a very fun matchup between the Panthers and the Cardinals. So we'll see. Heading on over to the Big East, we have Marquette at number 19, Creighton. Now, these two teams are the class of the Big East Conference. Marquette and Creighton are always the two-headed monster atop the Big East. Now, Creighton, unfortunately, took a tumble against St. John's, but St. John's is a competitive team. I think we all could say that St. John's is a good team, and they are for real. Marquette, on the other hand, is not ranked while Creighton is because they've played a competitive schedule and they have wins over ranked teams. This could be Marquette's chance to challenge Creighton. Now, Creighton obviously is now no longer invincible, but Marquette has faced some solid opponents in the non-conference schedule as well, as this will be played at Creighton. It's always a great matchup when Marquette and Creighton face one another, not just in volleyball, but in basketball and maybe soccer and baseball as well. Regardless, I think this is going to be a great Big East matchup, and I'm looking forward to what Marquette and Creighton can do. It's basically a battle in the Midwest, so we'll see what happens with Marquette and Creighton. I already said that number 1 Texas and Kansas is basically a noteworthy matchup to watch for, as it's a 2-game series on Saturday and on Sunday, so Texas will play Kansas on Saturday, then on Sunday. Both matches are at Kansas. So now let's jump to these final 3 matches, and they're all Pac-12 matches. So if you're a Pac-12 fan, then pull up a seat and pay attention. So the first noteworthy matchup to watch for on Sunday is number 24 Colorado at USC. Again, it's another one of those matches where Colorado has to prove themselves that they are for real. They will be coming off of a matchup against UCLA, so I imagine they'll have a better feel for what they can do in Southern California. USC is another. For USC. This is another matchup that they need to come up big in because they were chosen to finish 6th behind Washington State and Washington, UCLA, Stanford, and Oregon. But USC is kind of proving that they're for real. Their only 2 losses in the Pac-12 were to Washington and UCLA, which are both not bad losses. At least they didn't get swept. That's the only silver lining in that, but still. For USC, a win over Colorado would be huge, considering if they beat Colorado, that would kind of put them on the radar of teams to watch for. For Colorado, though, beating USC at USC would be a big-time accomplishment for them, just because it is tough to beat USC at USC, but I will say this about the Trojans, they're not to be underestimated. I think them moving Shannon Scully to the outside is the better decision, just because that was her primary position before she had the idea of playing libero. Keep in mind, she was libero when it came to the U.S. training team or the U.S. collegiate team. Regardless, I think USC is starting to find their identity and they're starting to make moves. And the fact that they took a set off of Washington is kind of impressive. It's just that they have to put it together when it comes to the remainder of the match. They can't just play one good set and then just get complacent. No, it doesn't work that way. So then elsewhere in the Pac-12, we have number 17 Stanford at number 14 Oregon. This is kind of this along with the next matchup that I'm about to go over is kind of the matchup of the day right here. For Stanford and Oregon, it's the battle of 3-1 teams. Well, before Stanford faces Oregon, Stanford will play Oregon State on Friday, and then Oregon will play Cal on Friday as well. So for Stanford against Oregon, this is going to be a very fun matchup right here. Oregon suffered its first loss in Pac-12 play this past weekend, and then 2 weeks ago, Stanford suffered its first loss in Pac-12 play to UCLA. Stanford definitely knows that the margin of error in terms of winning the conference is very slim. I think Stanford has a great team. I think they're starting to come along nicely. Sydney Francis is gelling quite well for the Stanford offense. Katie Baird and Kendall Kipp are both contributing well, and Cammie Minor is also a definite workhorse at the setter position. Cammie Minor is kind of like a mini Jenna Gray, as she is setting up the offense very nicely. And yeah, it's tough to knock Stanford because they're good at pretty much every position. Same could be said for Oregon, though, as Brooke Nuneviller has been phenomenal for Oregon, and then the rest of Oregon has just been top-notch. And it's tough to win at Matthew Knight Arena, but the same can be said for all the other gymnasiums out there. So all in all, for Oregon and Stanford, it's going to be a fight-to-the-finish matchup, and I could see that matchup going 5 sets. I would not be surprised if that matchup went 5. So there's that little matchup right there. And then the last matchup to watch for this weekend is number 15 Utah at number 16 UCLA. So for Utah, this is kind of another matchup for them to prove. This is a big-time matchup for them to prove, as UCLA and Utah are both basically like neck and neck. I honestly think that there's not too much separating UCLA and Utah. Like, UCLA lost to Washington this past weekend, and then the first week of Pac-12 play, Utah lost to its rival Colorado in the Rumble in the Rockies. So all in all, for Utah and UCLA, this is the matchup of which team is better. But before Utah and UCLA lock horns with one another, like I said, UCLA will play Colorado on Friday, and Utah will be playing at USC on Friday as well. So this is kind of a matchup matinee. I think all the matchups between USC, Colorado, UCLA, and Utah are very noteworthy. And it's going to weed out on who are contenders and who are pretenders between those 4 teams that I just mentioned. And then also do keep an eye out for Stanford and Oregon, because their matchups prior to the 2 teams facing one another could be trap games, as Cal is kind of on the cusp of Cal's looking for that first Pac-12 win, as is Oregon State, but they're both right there. And I think conference play is basically no guarantee. Like, any given day, a conference team could fall. So we'll see what happens in terms of conference play this weekend. I think it's going to be a fun little weekend of volleyball. And it's already been fun, because you look at this past week where we had 6 upsets, and then you look at the previous weekend where we had 9 upsets in the conference openers. It's absolutely amazing. So on that note, that is going to do it for the matchups to watch for this weekend. And that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in. As Gina G says, sounds like Texas and Kansas State will be a good match. And then she also says she congratulated Cammie Minor on Twitter. Yep, I'm going to make this prediction right here. I think Cammie Minor gets Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. But on that note, it's time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all very much for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate you. If you're listening live, I appreciate you. If you are listening via the playback, I appreciate you. If you are listening at any time, any place, anywhere, even in the wee hours of the morning, I appreciate you. Thank you to Gina G that popped in the chat room. I appreciate you. Do your thing tomorrow. I'll be listening to Reppin' the NorCal Sports, because it is a fantastic show. And she's going to unleash about the 49ers falling to the Sea Chickens. So, for everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourselves a great rest of the week. And Gina says that would be dope if Cammie Minor did win Freshman of the Year in terms of Pac-12 Conference. I agree. And thank you, Gina. She says, another awesome show. I appreciate you. And I appreciate everyone for the support, because IE Sports Radio is for the people, by the people, and vice versa. You all have yourselves a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action that is going on. And I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!